Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. By popular demand, today is the day that I'm going to show you how to do English paper piecing. And yes, if you are not familiar with what English paper piecing is, it's when you take a shape, such as this little hexagon here, and wrap it in fabric. You can either hand baste it or glue it, and you create a whole bunch of these little hexagons. And when you have a nice pile amassed, you can hand stitch them together to create a really beautiful piece of patchwork. Or you can create quilts, or as I did here, I made, or it's the beginning of a little coaster. Basically, I sewed a bunch of hexagons together to create this little rosette right here, and then I simply appliqued it onto another piece of fabric to create this really pretty, cute little coaster. But if you make enough of these hexagons and stitch them all together, you can create a really, really nice patchwork quilt. Basically, we're talking heirlooms here. If that piques your interest, gather around, grab a cup of something, because we're gonna get into things. To get started, all you need is thread, and the thread that I use to do my EPP is Superior Threads Bottom Line 60 weight. So it's really nice and fine. It's polyester. You can use cotton. Whatever you have lying around, honestly, is fine, but many English paper piecers, and myself included, prefer to use this very fine thread out of polyester. It's more sturdy. Cotton, I find, breaks a little easier when you're English paper piecing. I don't know, just in my experience. So yeah, this Bottom Line Superior thread works really well. Aurifil is another brand that English paper piecers swear by. So there's that. And then you will also need a needle. Again, whatever you have lying around, but if you want to go the tried and true method, definitely look into Milliner needles. These are by John James, and they're size 11, and they're very, very fine sewing needles. And the reason why a lot of EPPers like using them, again, myself included, is because they mold to your hand in a way. They're very fine, they're very sharp, making it easy to just go through your fabric, and you can work very quickly. That's just my humble opinion, and what I've gleaned from learning about English paper piecing over the last couple of months. So yes, you need thread, you need needles, and then you need some snips to snip your thread. These are my favorite snips. They're by Merchant and Mills. So there's that, and then you will also need, this is optional, there's a few ways to wrap your paper pieces with fabric. Many EPPers like to hand baste their fabric to the paper. I honestly prefer to use a glue stick just because it's fast, it's easy, it's water soluble, and makes the whole process fast so I can get to the actual sewing part. But again, your mileage may vary. You may very well enjoy the hand basting process. I've tried it. It is very meditative, it's very relaxing, but I just want to get to the sewing. So glue stick it is for me, and that's what we're going to be using today. I also have these slightly larger scissors. They're a little larger than my thread snips because these are great for cutting out fabric and cutting out my cardboard templates because they're small enough, and I like that they have a perforated edge. It just gives a very satisfying slice through things. Again, whatever you have lying around. I'll keep saying that throughout this entire tutorial. In case you're curious, these are stainless steel scissors by a company called Beaditive. I found them on Amazon. I'll put a link below where you can find all of these gizmos and gadgets. You will also need fabric. So again, English paper piecing is the perfect stash busting project. Again, whatever you have lying around, there's that phrase again, whatever scraps you happen to have, get them out because we're gonna make some hexies with them. This is some beautiful fabric that I have left over from one of the first quilts that I ever made. It's fabric from Art Gallery. Just to give you a little preview, this is what we're going to be making today. We're just gonna cut out a bunch of hexies and sew them together to make one of these really pretty florets. In addition to fabric, you're also going to need paper, hence English paper piecing. However, you don't want to just use regular copy paper. You want to use something with a little more weight to it, like cardstock or resume paper. I love using old postcards or, something with a little weight to it, if that makes any sense. And then you're gonna need something to trace and cut your shapes out. So I have these acrylic templates. You can find these pretty much anywhere. They're available on Etsy. They come in many different shapes and sizes, but these are great for tracing and cutting out fabric. The innermost part is what you want to trace and cut your cardboard out, and the outer part has the seam allowance. So you wanna use this to trace and cut out your fabric with. But today is your lucky day because I did all the hard work for you. Oh yes, down in the description box below is a link to a free PDF that I created for you. It has a bunch of hexes that you can print out and cut out and get started right away, so you don't have to worry about sitting there and tracing out all your hexy shapes. You can just print it out and cut it out immediately. So I hope you enjoy that. But again, there's nothing wrong with this method. It can be very relaxing and therapeutic. Throw on a podcast, an audiobook, a TV show, and just have at it. Alternatively, there is yet another path of least resistance. It is quite an investment. If you watch this channel, you know that I have the Go Me die cutter by Accuquilt. I love this thing to bits because it kills two birds with one stone. I can cut out my paper pieces and fabric in one fell swoop just by layering fabric and cardstock on top of the die cutter and rolling it through the machine, and Bob's your uncle. You have all your bits ready. Full disclosure, I am in no way sponsored by Accuquilt. They are not paying me to say this. I'm just a huge fan. My mother-in-law gifted me the die cutter a long time ago, and I absolutely love using it. There's more than one way to do this. You can just simply print out the free template and get started with that, just to get your feet wet and see if you like it. Don't go investing in. It's always best to try the free route first. Now that you know all the many ways to cut out your fabric and your paper pieces, pick your poison, and let's get ready to move on to the next step. Now we're ready to attach our fabric to our paper piece. To do this, it's super easy. So you want to lay your paper piece in the middle, smack dab in the middle, so that you can see your seam allowances, and it's relatively even on every side. And then you're going to take your glue stick and not applying directly to the edge. You want to avoid the edge, but just under, just a scant under your the edge of the paper. You don't need too much glue, but once you have a decent amount, you want to press down on the table and fold your fabric piece over like so. And this glue is great. You don't need much, and it holds just enough to get the job done, if that makes sense. So, there you go. So once you have one end down, you're just gonna go over to the next edge. It doesn't matter which one, whichever one is more convenient. And you do wanna put a little glue over the fabric that is folded down, just to keep things, down, and just keep folding over, creating a little bit of a fold at every corner. So you're just gonna push that down and just continue around, adding glue. And this glue is water soluble, so it's gonna stay put for the most part. And there we go, we have our first shape. Now we'll grab our next piece. This is going to be the center, and you can get a really nice assembly line going. And you can see here, this part was not cut out very accurately, but that's okay because it's the seam allowance. So don't get too caught up in getting your fabric seam allowances exact, if that makes sense. You really want to focus on getting the paper pieces precise as opposed to the fabric. But again, if you don't, not the end of the world. So I am just going to continue gluing my fabric to my paper bits. And you can see with this one, this was a hand cut one. This piece right here, I used the Go Me die cutter because it has a shorter seam allowance, which I wish it was a little longer, because here you can see the one that I hand cut, I gave it a bigger seam allowance. So it gives me just a little bit more leverage when it comes to folding down and gluing my edges together. So that's the one leg up you have if you are hand cutting your fabric. So if you are starting out, I would recommend starting out by hand cutting your pieces so you can give yourself that extra at least a quarter-inch seam allowance, so you can have that extra bit of fabric to work with when gluing down your edges. The quilter's knot is probably one of the most important things you will learn when it comes to English paper piecing, because again, completely mind-blowing when I learned how to do it. It just made life so much easier. So using this delightfully cherry red thread so you can easily see, after you've threaded your needle, with your needle facing one way, the tail of your thread facing the other way, essentially your needle is having a conversation with the tail of the thread. Just pretend they're hanging out, chilling. Hey, what's up? Nothing much, how are you? Let's make a knot, shall we? Okay, the tail is going to go on top of the needle. You're going to wrap the thread 3 times around the needle, or 4, however many times, 3 or 4 times, and then you're going to pinch the wraps between your forefinger and your thumb, and then carefully grab the tip of the needle and pull it through, not letting go of the little swirls that you made, and just gently drag your finger along the length of the thread until you reach the end, and boom, you have a magical little knot at the end. How cool is that? This is the best part, guys, my favorite part. So you're gonna wanna take your hexes, lay them right sides together, and you wanna make sure that your edges are nice and aligned and straight and matching. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start from one point and make whip stitches all the way across one edge to another whip stitch. So I'm gonna insert my needle going through the 2 points. Again, you want to make sure that you're not going through the paper, you're only going through the fabric. And then I just like to go through one more time just to create an extra bit of insurance there and create a little knot. And now we're ready to whip stitch. So you're just gonna take your needle, again, just going through the fabric, not the paper. You just wanna feel the needle skimming across the top of the cardboard when you're going through. But if you do manage to nick the cardboard, it's completely fine and not the end of the world. And if your thread gets a little tangled, that's quite all right too. And you do want to work with a relatively short length of thread just to prevent any tangles. So I like to measure my thread from the tip of my finger all the way to my elbow. And that's a good amount of thread for me to work with without dealing with any crazy tangles, but it happens here and there. So you're just going to keep making these parallel stitches, going in one way, coming out the other, going back, going in one way, going out the other. And you can start to see these little diagonal, it starts to create like a little diagonal stitches even though you're going straight across. And for this, obviously, you want to use matching thread, typically like a universal gray or white or black, depending on the color of your fabric. I'm just using red just to make it easy for you to see. So yeah, just making even. You want your stitches to be relatively close together, not too close, they don't have to be. They can if you want. It really comes down to personal preference. I usually like to keep mine about like 1 millimeter apart. Again, whatever you're comfortable with. And when you're pinching your 2 pieces of paper together, 2 little hexes together, you don't want a death grip. You don't need a death grip. I know when I started out, for some reason, I just wanted to like, these 2 hexes must be together. But no, you just pretend, again, you want to hold it firmly, but not too firm. Just like a small little bird in your hand, you know? So now we're coming up towards the end, and we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to sew through twice on those 2 little pointy bits through 2 bits of fabric, and then just create a little knot just to create just a little extra security. So we finished one side. I have, let me count. So we have 18 stitches all the way across here. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like that much. And when you open it up, you can see my stitches on the other side because I use contrasting thread. But if you're using like a white thread or a gray, you will barely be able to see that. But I kind of like being able to see the stitches because it gives it that kind of hand-sewn, handcrafted quality, if that makes any sense. So yay, now we're ready to add our next shape. And at this point, you can use good judgment, but I am just going to cut my thread here, like so. You can even trim it down a little bit. You kind of want some kind of tail. So I'm going to move my next piece to where I want it to go. And then because I'm going to start stitching my pieces together from here, this way, and this way, kind of like in an L shape, I'm going to fold this piece over the petal I just sewed on, right sides together, and I'm going to stitch down this edge. So, lift up your paper like this and do the same thing we did last time. Just thread it through, oops, making sure I'm not nipping the paper, only the fabric. I'm going through both edges, just like that. I think I wrapped these a little too well. Okay, so I'm going to pull that through. So, and I'm just going to continue stitching along here, like so. Creating little whip stitches all along this edge. Reminding myself not to have a death grip. It's okay, Kristen. And once I reach this corner right here, I'm just going to, I like to add a little knot in the corners just to add a little extra insurance. So I'm going to open this up, and you can see we've sewed this edge, we've sewed this edge, and now we're going to sew this edge. So we're going to fold it over, and it's okay if you have to bend your paper. I know because the paper's pretty, I kind of go, oh, I don't want to bend it, but you know what? It's there to keep things stable and your edges straight, so bend away. So now we're gonna come in and stitch this edge together, and first make a little knot right there again. And I'm doing this relatively slow, but the more you do this, you start to pick up speed. Sometimes once in a blue moon, I'll prick myself with the needle, but it's it's not all that bad, guys. Blood has not been drawn, don't worry. But yeah, you just kind of pick up speed and develop your own way of doing this. I know a lot of people like to use thimbles to, protect their fingers and help shuttle the needle through, but me personally, I find that I don't really need it. Tie my last knot right there, like so, and then cut the fabric. I'm gonna open this up, and look at that. Isn't that so pretty so far? And that, my friends, is all there is to it. What we did to this hexagon, where we stitched down this edge and this edge, creating an L, we're just gonna keep doing that all the way around until we are ready to stitch this edge together with the last hexie. And it's okay if you have to bend your papers to make the edges meet up. That's what the papers are there for. They're not gonna go anywhere. But what I do wanna mention is that you don't want to remove your paper until all the edges are surrounded. So as you can see here on this one, I removed the paper from this part because its job was done. All the edges were surrounded. It no longer needed that support. It's up to you. You can leave it in, but do not remove the paper until all the edges are sewn together. But yeah, just a little word of caution there. Once you have all these pretty little rosettes compiled, you can really create something amazing. So for example, I created this little pot holder. It's a little incomplete, but I took one of my rosettes and appliqued it all around the edges to this one square of fabric, and you can make a really nice pot holder. I still have to quilt it and add some binding, but just to get an idea of what you can make with these really cute little hexies. If you can sew hexies together like this, you can English paper piece just about any shape. I mean, the world's your oyster. So I sincerely hope that you learned a lot here today. If you have any lingering questions, feel free to ask me in the comments below, and I will do my best to get back to you on those. If you are new here, welcome to my little corner of the interwebs. This is not the usual format of my channel. Typically, I sit down and chat with you once a week, sharing all of my makes with the occasional tutorial sprinkled in here and there, and this happens to be one of those tutorials. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll subscribe and check out some of my other videos on this channel. But until the next video, have an amazing day, have an amazing weekend, happy paper piecing, and I will see you next time. Bye!